All right. Sounds like we are officially live. And first, let's start this thing off, right? Let's, I don't know if you can see that or not, but let's pop this thing off. That's how I started one of my races last summer, the bike race with literally a shotgun to beer at 8 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, with TBD if we're going to do that for Psychoactive or not. Anyway, thank y'all for coming. Again, as it was just mentioned, we'll put this up on the YouTube page. You can share it. People can kind of reference it. As many of you know, obviously, I want human powered movement to be a universal concept. I don't want this to be just a Charlotte-based thing. I want this to be all over. So it's really cool to kind of see how people are viewing this across the country and checking out with this new kind of wild and weird new race format. So let's get started here. I'm going to just kind of, whoops, you can see I'm clearly planned. Can you guys see my screen? Oh, wait, let me see if I can share my screen here. Hang on. Here we go. Let me do it this way. All right. Now, good. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Rock and roll. Cool. Well, let's get started. Amanda, welcome. Welcome to the shit show. This should be fun. All right. So thank you all again for joining. This is an intro clinic, right? We're not going to go into like massive detail here. I want to kind of go over the overview. You know, Tim, I know you've done this thing before. We ran a Last Runner Standing event before together, and Lisa, you were out there. So I know a lot of people kind of have some ideas around this stuff. This will be focused a bit more on last man standing races in general. Obviously, we will get into some of the specifics or some of the details with Psychoactive. But again, I want this to kind of be evergreen, meaning I want this to be able to be viewed by anybody, anywhere, and get some information on what the hell this kind of weird, wild event is all about. So again, intro clinic, we'll go into a few details here. Obviously, there is going to be a Q&A at the end of this. Also, for anybody, I mean, you guys, most of you guys should have my contact information, but if anybody, you know, following up, watching this thing later needs this, I've put this up just to kind of have, you know, there's my contact information. If there's any questions, either leading up to our event, the Psychoactive Last Runner Standing event, or any other events that other people are doing across the country. Obviously, I've kind of created Human Power Movement to be a platform to help facilitate movement in people's lives. So if that's answering questions, then that's perfect. That's awesome. If it's, you know, putting on events, that's awesome too. So long story short, I wanted to put this up here early so people can kind of take a picture of that if they need any other further questions after this, after our little gathering here. So quick overview of topics, right? So again, general overview of what the event is, like what's the format, how is it different from other races, all that kind of stuff. And also there's different elements of Last Runner Standing events, right? So just because it's a Last Runner Standing event doesn't mean it's a sanctioned style event. They're all different. Each event kind of has their own lap distances. They have their own, you know, time limits. Some of them have a declining clock. Some of them have a static clock. How eliminations work. Some do prizes, some don't. We'll kind of go through all the different formats and kind of dig into that a little bit. Big one too, and we'll kind of spend probably most of the time on this, but how to prepare, right? So again, if you've done these events before, you know, Tim, I know when we did that one, right, we all learned a ton of it. And I think that's just so important to kind of share some of that first world perspective of, you know, how the hell do you approach this thing? It's just so different. So strategy, gear, training, hydration, nutrition, you know, how to set up all of your stuff. I mean, all that kind of stuff. We'll kind of tap into that as well. And then again, we will end on an open Q&A. If anybody has questions throughout this, whether, you know, if we're talking about certain stuff, if everybody needs any clarification on rules, on, you know, hey, I got a question on that, let's dig in, we can certainly do that. So feel free to jump in whenever. I think you can just probably throw it into the chat at the bottom. I'll try and kind of keep an eye on that. If I don't, we'll make sure we open that up during the Q&A. So sound good? No questions? Housekeeping, again, this is a social event, so let's get into it. All right, so last runner standing event, like what the hell is this thing, right? Most people are, I've done a 5K, I've done a 10K, I've worked my way up to a half, a full, an ultra, whatever it may be. But what the hell is this new last runner standing event? How does it work? What's the details? So essentially, yeah, it's an alternative style of running. I have event and race on here. I tend to lean, this is my personal preference in how I approach things. I tend to lean more to an event. I'm trying to create events. Anybody can go do a race. Anybody can go run a 5K, go to the start line, go to the finish line, get the banana in the middle and move on. I mean, I really try and make this almost less about the interpersonal competition and more about the interpersonal competition, if that makes sense. I was literally homebrewing beer last night. I bottled 100 beers for our Psychoactive event. I mean, that's no race director is the dumbass enough to brew beer for everybody. But that's part of what I want to do. I want to create that event experience, add a little bit more meaningful stuff to it. So I'm going to key in on the word event here. A lot of these things are called races. They're kind of interchangeable in the world, in the running world, but we're trying to create more of an experience. So as y'all know, and if obviously you guys are intrigued enough to check into this event, interested to learn more, you know that this is a popular style event that's really kind of sweeping. I put the running industry. I originally had it sweeping the country, but no, this thing is happening internationally. It's all over the place. So it's just kind of a fun new way to run and hang out and enjoy, the running, the activity of running, which is what we all love. So you also see sometimes it's called an elimination race. So again, one of the races that Tim and I did, and that Lisa came by for, was called the mass extinction elimination race. So a lot of times you'll kind of see some of those terms interchangeable. Same idea. It's really kind of everybody gets eliminated until there's one person left. So it's kind of the same concept. Biggest difference here is they're lap based, right? And that's what I think we all kind of know this at this stage, but it's not a point A, you run 5K, you finish and you're done. This is an event where we're just constantly running laps. It's a set predetermined route. They can be anything from half a mile up to 5 miles. So it's a predetermined lap that you continually run at set preset time increments. And so we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. So there's really there's not a ton of rules. And again, we'll kind of dig into the rules a little bit later, but the main two ways that people get knocked out of these events or eliminated in these events are through not finishing one of those laps within the preset time limit. Again, depending on the time limit, depends on how long the lap is or how far the lap distance is. So that's one way. So let's say if you have to complete a lap in 30 minutes and you come across the finish line and lap, at 31 minutes, then you're eliminated. So that's one way you can be eliminated. The second way you can be eliminated is if you don't start a lap with the rest of the group. So again, everybody has to start together. Everybody has to kind of complete that lap in the same time window. So again, those are kind of the two main ways you can get knocked out. Obviously, if there's any reason, if you just don't feel like going out, if you have to go to the bathroom and you miss the start, there's a lot of different variables in this thing that are in play. So those are the two main ways that you can kind of get knocked out or eliminated in this event. And as you can see, that bottom bullet point there, this is where the fun gets to. We just keep going until there's literally one person left. So again, that's that last runner standing concept. Which is really kind of fun. I mean, it's kind of a slow building event. The first few laps, you got plenty of time to finish and nobody's getting knocked out. And then as you keep going, things start to go south, and that's where it really starts to get fun. So again, there's race directors. We don't set an end point. We say, look, we're just going to keep rocking and rolling until there's literally one person left. So that's kind of the general overview of last runner standing events. Again, kind of a funky concept, right? It's a little bit of an open-ended event. It's not as structured as it relates to specific start and finish locations. So it's really kind of a totally new dynamic. I will say that one of the biggest differences with this style of event is it has much more of a mental game into it. So it's not just put my head down, follow the arrows, and go. you constantly have to be thinking about this. So there's a lot of different variables that are always changing, that are always, that may be different in lap, number 4 versus lap 14 versus lap 24. And so what I love is, I was a kinesiology major, which is a study of human movement, and a psychology minor. So I just love the dynamic of mental and physical. And so that's what this event really kind of offers, which is super fun. All right, so that's kind of the general overview. Let's get into some of the aspects of different types of last runner standing events. And so if you guys have done any research or kind of done other events, you guys know this, that there's no set, as you can see in the second bullet point there under lap base. This is not a sanctioned event. I mean, this is the basically the antithesis of a sanctioned event. There's no sanctioning, there's no regulation. It's really just cool. How can we use a cool venue and see who the last runner standing is? So that's what's really cool about these. Again, I've seen these when in my research, I've seen events anywhere from literally half a mile, just a half-mile loop, all the way up to 5+ miles. And so it all kind of depends on where the race is happening, where the venue is, what kind of surface, all kinds of stuff. Theoretically, you could do this on a track. I mean, you can do it at any distance, any location, anywhere, which is super kind of cool. That allows kind of whack job race directors to come up with cool ways to screw with people, which is secretly what we all love to do. So again, the lap base, it's a consistent lap distance. So, and you can see on our bottom bullet point there, Psychoactive, our last runner standing event, is going to be a 1.25 mile lap, right? So we're going to continue to do that 1.25 miles at each time we go. Each time we send the group out, we'll run 1.25 miles, and then we'll send them out 1.25 miles, send them out 1.25 miles. So it's kind of a cool concept. Can get a little monotonous, which again brings that mental aspect into it as well. A big one on here, and a lot of the research I was doing leading up to my event was to either do a declining clock or do a static clock. So basically what that means is, and you can kind of read the bullet points there, some events will feature a declining clock, which is the more laps you do and the longer that the event is going, the clock starts to decline, meaning you have less time to complete that lap. And so a lot of times race directors will do this to intentionally knock people out, right? Personally, for Psychoactive, I'm not interested in being out there for 5 days, because Courtney Dahlwalter shows up and is just rocking and rolling for 5 straight days. I'm like, man, I got other stuff to do. So what I've decided is I've kind of built a pace chart and a lap schedule to try and knock everybody out of the race before sunset with Psychoactive. We'll go into the pace chart a little later. I'll show you that. Most events should have a pace chart that really kind of outlines, all right, how far do I have to run, how long, what's the time limit, what pace do I need to keep, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a fun aspect. That some races have a declining clock, other races just say, hey, you're going to run a 5K every 45 minutes, and we're just going to keep going, and the time doesn't change, that 5K distance doesn't change, we're just going to keep going and going and going and going. So some people will do the declining clock, some people won't. So obviously race directors have the ability to kind of do what they want on that. I think we'll go into the pace chart next. I think that's maybe the next slide. So we'll go to that next. Last bullet point on here is rules, right? Again, all these rules are going to be totally different for different events. Again, this is not sanctioned, right? There's not, USA track and field sanctioned events that you have to have this and you have to have that. No, this is kind of these grassroots organic style events. I don't know if I have it in here, but one of the biggest ones and one of the coolest ones that I've seen is called Biggs Backyard Ultra. It's out in Tennessee, in Lazarus Lake, who you guys have probably heard of, but he's the one that does the Barclays Marathon. He's an absolute, lunatic. He's a little bit of a psycho when it comes to race directing. And so he started this Biggs Backyard. Biggs is his dog. And so he's just ran I think of 4.16 miles around his backyard every hour. And they literally do that for, I think the record is 85 laps or whatever. Harvey something or other has that record of 200 some ridiculous miles. But anyway, so all these events are totally different, and they all have different rules. Okay, so some of the main rules, as we touched on before, are all participants must start each lap together. A lot of times races will kind of say, hey, you have to start at least, within 10 seconds of the start time, meaning they don't want people kind of like waiting for a few minutes and then leaving on their own. And they're trying to time it up to where they can run that lap and then just keep going into the next one. With Psychoactive, what we're going to do is you're going to have, I don't know if it'll be like 10 or 15 seconds, but you're going to have to leave the start area within that 10 or 15 seconds from when we say go. Again, the idea is that we don't want people kind of like bunching up 2 laps together to try and do back-to-back laps. The beauty of this and what's really fun as a race director is, messing with people and making it a little bit more difficult and challenging. And part of that is the start and stop of constantly having to start at the same time. And then if you have some extra time, stopping and waiting until you can start again. So very few rules, but most races will kind of have some sort of start window that you have to start your lap in to get going. Also, as we said before, the rules are pretty simple. If you don't finish your lap within the time window, you're eliminated. If you don't start that lap, you're eliminated. Again, as you can see, there's some other things too in other races. We've kind of outlined a lot of this stuff on our website, but it's like, all right, well, is there an aid station? What about, crew members? What about pacers? What about, all this kind of stuff? So all those rules are going to be kind of different and vary from event to event. Which again is kind of the fun part of it. As a race director, you get to kind of pick and choose how you want to mess with people. So any questions so far? Everyone feeling good? Cool. All right, so next slide we'll go into, this is the pace chart, and this is a pace chart specific to Psychoactive. So let me actually click on this. We'll kind of pop this open. This is just a good example of a pace chart, right? So again, this is specific for anybody listening that's not doing Psychoactive. This is specific to Psychoactive, which is our event coming up in a couple weeks, but you should see some sort of relatively similar chart to this, right? So what you can see is we've basically in the gray lines, we've kind of set our clock, our time limit for each lap. We're going to start at 19 minutes. So again, our distance is 1.25 miles and the duration you have is 19 minutes. Plenty of time, right? You can see the minimum pace per mile, that next column there, kind of in the middle of that document. That's the minimum pace that you need to hold in order to hit, in order to complete that lap within that allotted time. So again, like I said earlier, a lot of, the weird part of these races, especially for runners that haven't done this before, it's like, well, 15, 12. I mean, I could do that. I could do that all day long, but it's kind of funky because you have to there's no real, and we'll get into this in the strategy, there's no real advantage of finishing first. Like, you're, other than maybe a little bit of the mental warfare that you're playing with your competitors, there's really no advantage of busting out a hot lap in a 7-minute pace, and then you're just kind of hanging out for a little bit. So kind of an interesting, again, we'll get into that in strategy. But what you can see here is after 5 laps, and those first 5 grayed out rows there, after 5 laps, we dropped, so starting in lap 6, we dropped the time limit to 18 minutes. All right. So again, we're going to feature a declining clock in our race. We're going to drop that down to 18-minute time limit. Again, you're running that same lap, same course, but you've got 14 minutes. You have to hold a 14-minute and 24-second pace in order to complete that lap. So again, you can kind of see, I'll kind of scroll this a little bit so you can see, after every 5 laps, we're dropping. Okay, we're dropping it 1 more minute. Then at lap 16, we drop 1 more minute. At lap 21, we drop 1 more minute. You can kind of see once you start getting down here, let's look at lap 36, right? At lap 36, you've got to hold a 9:36 pace, and this is your total miles run. You're at 45 miles. So that's where this stuff really starts to get fun, is like, okay, you start to get in, like anybody can kind of run a 15-minute and 12-second mile. Once you start piling up those mileage, the distance starts getting up there, that pace starts getting a little faster. You're starting to get a little tired. You're playing the mental game. Everyone else is drinking beer. You're on the outside looking in, wishing you were drinking beer. That's when this thing gets really, really fun. So I just want to show you this again for the people out there that are not interested in Psychoactive but are looking at this as a cool new race style. I just want to show you this is an example of a pace chart. You'll also see we've got some prize tiers. We'll get into that a little bit later. We've opted to obviously there's only one winner, but we've opted to give out prize levels at half marathon right here. Then you can, in addition to that, you also get a second prize if you hit a marathon. In addition to that, you get a third prize if you hit a 50K. And then down here, you hit a fourth prize level if you hit 50 miles. So we've kind of put some built-in prize incentives into this as well to kind of keep, dangle a carrot. Not everyone's going to win. There's literally only one winner, but we've got some cool prizes. And what we're doing is we've got our hoodies and hats and bandanas and stickers and all kinds of stuff. So hopefully you guys walk away just completely merched up in our event. So we'll see what happens. That could come back to bite me, but we'll see. So Brian wants a bandana. And Amanda, I'm going to the chat here. And Amanda says, so you're saying we can't drink beer while we are part of the laps? I'm out. I hear you, Amanda. That's let me be clear. You can drink as much beer as you would like. There are zero issues with that whatsoever. It's highly encouraged. Again, we may give bonus points for those that are imbibing in homebrew or Sierra Nevada. So cheers to that. All right. Any other questions on that? So that's a good example of a pace chart in our lap schedule. Again, each race director should have something in their race document or race information, but I wanted to show you an example of that. All right, let's go to strategy and training. So this one is kind of super fun. Again, I'm a mental physical guy, so I love the whole dynamic of building a strategy around this, because again, it's not just a typical race. So and anybody that's done these, they know, and kind of what I was mentioning before, there's no major advantage of flying out of the gate strong. The one we did, it was, most people were walking that first lap. First couple of laps actually. And so it's like, all right, just kind of get into a groove. It's kind of funny to have that, you're at a running event and everyone just bursts out of the gate walking, which is kind of a little bit of an atypical approach. We've all seen it when everyone's toeing the line and just can't wait to burst out of the gate. This is funky because everyone just starts walking, which is funny for a running event. So, but that's part of the strategy. The last race I did, I mean, literally, I don't remember seeing ultimately the winner. I don't remember seeing him almost throughout the entirety of the entire event. And I'm not a fast guy or anything, but he was just hanging in the back of the pack, was not making any noise. It was just kind of just totally cruising. He found his groove. And then, 50 some miles later, he's literally the last one standing. And so I'm not saying that has to be your strategy. Everyone needs to kind of think about this and come up with their own strategy. But my point is, I would highly encourage people to say, all right, let me reset my mind on this, because yeah, it's not just this sprint right out of the gate. This is very much an endurance thing, not necessarily a speed thing. So just kind of think about that as you're approaching your strategy for the event. The next bullet point's an interesting one. I've gone back and forth with this personally. Each person has to kind of figure it out for their own. There's a strong argument for and against to setting a predetermined distance or time goal for yourself. That's why I put that question mark in there. So, what some people will do is they'll say, hey, cool, I just want to hit, cool, there's an incentive at the half marathon. Great, I just want to hit my half marathon and I'm out. Like, cool, that's a good goal. Like, the goal doesn't have to be to go out and win this thing. Use this thing as an opportunity to kind of, cool, I've never run a half, but this is a good chance for me to do that. So that's part of the strategy. Use that to your advantage. Another interesting one is, determine beforehand if you want to rest between laps or if you want to kind of just keep rolling through. So that kind of depends on your pacing. Some people like to sit, some people like to hang out, throw the legs up for a little bit. Other people just let it keep moving, and I don't want to mess with it. I just want to keep rolling through over and over and over. That's part of that strategy that you have to kind of figure out. Huge thing here. It looks like we're just under 10 minutes until we get kicked off here, but huge thing is organizing and planning your gear and nutrition beforehand. So what's going to happen in this is once that clock starts declining, you're going to have less and less time between laps. So what that means is you may only have 30 seconds between getting across that finish line in that lap and starting that next one. So that means that you need to plan ahead. You can't be digging around in your bag for a minute if you only have 30 seconds. So that's a huge, huge, huge one you have to really kind of think about. And of course, in any type of event, you always have to be able to, be ready to adapt and change your strategy mid-race. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of it. I'm going to kind of blast through some of this next few things. I want to make sure we get through the end and have a few minutes for Q&A. Training, as you guys can read there here, I mean, train as if you're in the event, right? This is not an ongoing sprint. There's a lot of stopping and starting. So just kind of think about that in your training. You could even, run a mile loop, sit down for a few minutes, run a mile loop, sit down for a few minutes. You want to simulate that race experience. So again, I'll kind of blast through some of the training. Nutrition and gear, same thing. Your typical nutrition and gear plan translates well to this. If you're an ultra runner and you're going for 50K on this, your nutrition plan and hydration plan is going to translate super well to this. You'll have some start and stops, obviously, with this type of race, but that nutrition plan is going to translate really, really well. A couple things to think about too. I'll know we'll walk through aid stations and ultras. You can do that kind of stuff, but remember here, that clock is always going on these last runner standing events. So that clock doesn't start. You've got to stay on the pace chart schedule, not your own schedule. So just think about that as you're going. Same thing with your prepping your gear. You got to prep your nutrition. If you need a gel, you may need to get it out, the previous lap, so it's ready for you once you finish the next lap. So just kind of think about some of that stuff. Handheld water bottles, again, depends on the distance of the lap. Ours is 1.25 miles. Probably not going to need any nutrition or hydration on the course. We will not have any aid stations. Again, you have to kind of just check into which event you're doing to see what the deal is. Moving over to gear, same thing. You want to kind of plan things out. If you need to swap your shoes, if you need to swap your shirt, socks, hat, whatever it is, plan in advance. Have that stuff all laid out. That's going to save you those precious, precious seconds as you're coming across the line and you hear, my dumbass telling you only got 20 seconds until we're going again. You don't want to be fumbling around in your bag trying to find your gear. So make sure that you are planning accordingly and laying everything out. Same thing with bring a chair if you want to sit down. If it starts raining, have some shelter, bring a tent, whatever it may be. But just kind of everything is just kind of planning ahead on this stuff. That's pretty critical on these types of events. All right. So again, I got about 6 minutes left here. And I wanted to get through that stuff. Let me flip back over to the questions. There's a dance emoji, which I love. Did I miss this? Is there water at the start finish line? Yes, Brian. So again, check into each one of your events. We will have that. Most are going to have that. We will have water and tailwind at the start, at kind of like that transition area. So we'll definitely have that out there as well. If you need to fill up, feel free to bring your own, obviously. But if we will certainly have that at the start finish. Let's see. Any other questions? Feel free to jump up, or I've got the chat box open here. What would your strategy be? So Chelsea's asking that. Depends on what part of it, Chelsea. I mean, what part of the race are you asking about as far as my particular strategy? So we'll wait for her to answer that question, and I'll be happy to answer it. In the meantime, one of the funky things, and again, feel free to jump in here. Got about 5 minutes left, but this is a super funky one. This bottom bullet point. What happens if I need to go to the bathroom? Sounds silly, but that was one of the biggest things I picked up from the race. I was like, there was a moment during the race, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to have time to go to the bathroom anymore. Like we're getting so close to, the cutoff that if I need to go, my window of opportunity has kind of shut off. So that's just kind of this weird, like you don't think about that in a typical race. So that's another funky aspect that, this event really kind of provides an interesting perspective. So a couple weird things. Let me see. So let me back up here. The first question was Chelsea's asking, walking to starting it or sitting in between. So my particular strategy would be I walked the first 5 or 6 laps of the event that I did, because again I was like, yeah, there's no advantage of jumping out of the gate quickly. I am also not your typical runner. I'm probably a little bit bigger, and so I like to get off my feet. So as it relates to sitting down in between laps, I was definitely sitting down. We've all heard that "beware of the chair" phrase before, and I think there's some truth to that, certainly. For me in particular, I was definitely sitting down in between. Again, that was just me kind of getting off my fat ass feet for a little bit. So Jeanette's question was, so only water and tailwind at the race headquarters. All nutrition is up to them. Exactly, correct. Good question. We will have that. We don't want to get into, you know, like specific dietary needs and all that kind of stuff. That is up to each individual person. The idea is, again, at a 1.25 mile route, plenty of opportunity to get back into your own aid station, bring what you need. It's super easily accessible. We don't want to start messing around with that. We've also, you know, quite frankly, we're trying to keep the cost down on this thing. And so we don't want to have to go out and buy a whole bunch of groceries that we're going to end up throwing out if people don't like, people aren't in the mood for boiled potatoes that particular day. We don't want to have a ton of boiled potatoes we're going to throw out. So yeah, good question, Jeanette, for sure. I think I missed food or snacks provided outside of water. So I think it just answered that, Tim. Yeah, good question. We'll probably do something maybe at the end. I don't know, I was thinking about maybe trying to order pizza or something like that midway through. One thing is we will have Summit Coffee is going to be doing a whole bunch of like instant coffee packets. So that's obviously not a nutritional thing, but if, you know, once you're done, if you want to fire up, have a couple jet boils out there, we can kind of hang out and drink some coffee. Plenty of beer, obviously, will be involved in this. Our particular event is on a family farm, so there's it's kind of a BYOB situation, BYO food and BYO beer. We will have plenty of Sierra Nevada beer as well as the homebrewed beer, which is a blackberry honey wheat beer, which should be pretty cool. I was trying to get blackberries from the farm, but I missed it during the peak blackberry season, so I failed you all. I'm sorry. Next question, Chelsea asks, sorry if I missed it. Is there a registration cap? There is. Registration is capped at 100 people. I think right now we're kind of floating at 30 or so. So I mean, we still got plenty of space in there. My hope and goal is that you guys will come out of this thing just freaking stoked to the gills and tell all your cool kid friends about this thing, and we can kind of bump up registration a little bit. One note, and I'll mention this in an email, but our t-shirt cutoff to guarantee shirts is Sunday. So if you want to guarantee a shirt, you need to sign up by Sunday, which is September 11th. We will order those things first thing Monday morning. So anybody who's a race director out there, I know there's maybe a few people, you know, the absolute love-hate relationship with trying to figure out what size shirts to order for people that have yet to sign up. That's going to be a margin killer if you're a race director. So anyway, share that with your friends as well. Let's see, any other questions? I'm going to just put this last slide up here. I think I've got a last slide with my contact info, but again, we got about 1 minute here. Are there any other questions? Feel free to jump in, shout them out if you want, or throw them in the chat. Looks like Brian is responding to the gills. I love it. Stoked to the gills. Can't wait. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Tim, thanks for your comment as well. I can't wait for this thing as well. As you guys know, this is a pretty this is a pretty significant labor of love, and so I'm excited to get you guys out there. It's a really cool farm, veteran owned, family owned. We're literally running through wildflower fields and hemp fields, so our event is going to have a pretty cool venue. So other than that, if there are no more questions, I think I lost my chat box. If there are no more questions, we're probably going to get kicked off. So if we do, we will see you guys on the 24th. Feel free to share this with other folks, and get up, get out, get moving. Love you guys. We will we'll catch you soon. Cheers.